Sometimes I might catch a little bit of flack about writing songs that are a little too dark or maybe a little too cynical. But that's because they're honest too, and a lot of the songs that I sort of come up with, when I come up with them, aren't really even designed for public consumption. They're designed to get these feelings that I don't like out of me. So ultimately, even though I'm writing these kind of cynical things and sort of dark things, I'm writing them because it makes me be less that way by getting them off my chest. So it's like therapy, kind of. It's like how in therapy you keep a journal or you paint. It's the same thing.
Here we are with Rob Compa of Dopapod. For everyone out there listening, in addition to playing with Dopapod, Rob here, he's a somewhat acclaimed music teacher. So, Rob, excited to pick your brain about all kinds of musical things, but talking about Dopapod, starting us off, you just came out with a new album, and there was a board game too. Can you kind of tell me about this and give me the backstory to start this off?
I can tell you what I know about it, but I haven't even played the board game yet, so maybe some of the more specific things I can't even say. I don't even have a copy yet. But yeah, we put out an album. It was like maybe a 2-year long thing, and with all these conference calls back and forth about how the game was going to work and what the art was going to look like. And by that point, I was kind of, I just wanted the songs to be good. So I had a couple little bits of input on the game, but mostly I just wanted to make sure that the songs were good, so. Yeah.
Are you feeling proud about the songs?
I feel great about them. I actually, I it feels weird to say this, but I listened to it while I was in the airport yesterday. I was traveling home from summer camp all day, and I finally got a chance to listen to like maybe half of the album. I just like kind of skipped to whichever songs which I couldn't really remember that well and I liked it a lot. I historically, I don't want to listen to our albums at all, It's not, I don't think anybody does. It's not like we sit around listening to our own records. That would be insane, But I gave it one spin, now that it's out in the world. And I honestly felt proud while I was listening to it. I felt good about it. Yeah. I feel like the music contains a little less, I feel like we're getting a little better at knowing what's necessary to make a good song and what's superfluous. I think when we were younger, and a lot of people do this and it's okay, I think you just need to ride the wave. If anything, we were just being ourselves, and above all, that's the most important thing. But when we were younger, that version of ourselves had a lot to prove, so there would be a lot of kind of intricacies in there that maybe didn't even need to be there, and they were cool, and I love playing those songs. But I like these ones because I feel like we've maybe gotten a little better at saying more but talking less, with our songwriting and with our improvising too. Actually, I feel that way with our live shows too. So I really liked that, and I felt like the songs, not all of them, there's a couple that aren't this way, and I love them because of that, but the songs are like about stuff. Some of our earlier stuff was like a little more just like, we were just starting our lyric writing journey and everything, and we just you just have to start somewhere. So there's a few tunes in the early days that really I couldn't even tell you what they're about. I don't know. They're not about anything. We're just trying our best, And I feel like a lot of these ones are a little more, you can sink your teeth into like what they mean. The individual, I hope, could sink their teeth into what they make of a song. Some of the songs have a little more positive of a message than some of the older ones did, and I like that too. Yeah.
Musically speaking, Neil, Chuck, Eli, Can you talk to me about some things you admire about their playing?
That's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. That's great. Well, let's start with Eli. I can probably communicate with Eli on a musical level better than anybody in the world. I think our ears are just really tuned to each other. And his work ethic is astounding. You wouldn't even believe it. Um, on a writing level, on a business level, on a practicing his instrument level, it's just constant. Um, and um, he writes so much that he doesn't even care if something doesn't get used because there's just so much more, it doesn't matter. Whereas I don't write nearly as much, you know? So when I do, it's sort of like this precious ore or something to me, you know? Like this is a valuable, oil that I've just, extracted from the earth. Like we got to use it. Can we use it somewhere, And then if like no, and I'll be like, "Oh, fuck." But with Eli, he just has so much, it doesn't really matter if it doesn't get used. So I really admire that about him, and just his work ethic is just crazy. Chuck, how do I put this? Well, he's the most fearless musician I know. I'll say that. He does not give a fuck what anybody else thinks, you know? So he'll play things on his instrument that I don't hear any other bass player play. It's not even that they don't have the guts to play it, they just would never think to play what he plays. They just wouldn't. I think this is important in a band, that whatever way one person is, that's a strength. Yeah, I think it's important that somebody else has sort of the opposite approach. So, I mean, Eli is crazily driven and ambitious and just always working. And Chuck is sort of the balm to that work ethic, where he's like, everybody calm down, slow down, enjoy this, you know? I mean, he works hard at his instrument, and he's writing more songs than he used to. Like he's got these weird, amazing tunes that, just like his playing, just they are just the strangest, funnest songs, and no one else would. He wrote a song about brushing his teeth, you know? Like nobody else would do that. And just on a musical level, he plays bass the way I wish every bass player would play. He doesn't. He still plays in such a unique way, but he's never ever overplaying. He always just makes, like, he's focused on the music sounding good, not on making himself sound good. You know, which I think everybody should do, no matter what their instrument is. And then for Neil's kind of like almost like somewhere in between Eli and Chuck. He's really ambitious, and he has these like wildly imaginative ideas about what music can be, and incorporating things that aren't even musical into our music, that again nobody else I've ever met would think to do. And sometimes those ideas are like, now not so much, because I've learned to trust Neil, but years ago he would have an idea of, like, he was like, I want to make this thing where when I hit a drum it controls the lights. And at the time I was like, that's the craziest fucking idea I've ever heard. And now that we've let him try some of those crazy ideas, they always work, and they always just make us a little more different from anybody else. Yeah, he's just a wildly creative human being, not even just in music, just in every sense of the word. And every bit of that creativity and every other part of his life seems to affect every other thing, including the music side. I would say he's probably the most forward thinking out of all of us as far as music and general creativity. He's open to anything. And then all three of them, obviously, like equally, are just like incredible listeners.
I'd love to hear you talk about darkness in art and how that could be a beautiful thing.
Okay, I was just thinking about this morning. I went for a walk after my wife left for work, because I was traveling all day yesterday, and I just sitting on planes and stuff. So I live right next to a state park, so I can go in the woods and walk on these trails. And while I was taking a walk, just on my phone and notes, I started writing a song. And I was just like kind of like hearing what it would sound like in my head, but it ended up being this kind of like punk rock, like Green Day song. I don't know if the world's ever going to see the song, but it's about how I don't like writing songs, you know? And which is kind of funny, because like I feel like that's sort of a punk thing, is they're like a little hypocritical. So it's like I thought it would be funny to be like, a song about how I hate writing songs, but it in itself is a song that I wrote. And I was kind of thinking after I came up with it that, like, sometimes I might catch a little bit of flack. I have in the past about writing songs that are a little too dark or maybe a little too cynical, but that's because they're honest too, and a lot of the songs that I sort of come up with, when I come up with them, aren't really even designed for public consumption. They're designed to get these feelings that I don't like out of me. So ultimately, even though I'm writing these kind of cynical things and sort of dark things, I'm writing them because it makes me be less that way by getting them off my chest. So it's like therapy, kind of. It's like how in therapy you keep a journal or you paint. It's the same thing. So to me, I just think on a human level, not even on a public consumption or content that the world will ever see, it's just healthy to write things that are a little dark if that's what you're feeling, because you might just have no other way to express them. And we all feel this way. We want to write something about like how mad we are and or upset about something or something that we just think is stupid. And your first instinct in this day and age is to make a Facebook post about it. You could go write a song. Why don't you do something constructive with it, you know? So that's my take on the darkness thing. I think it's important to make you a lighter person, to get that darkness onto a piece of paper or in a song or whatever, something creative. I think it's important.
I'd love to hear you talk about something you think is maybe overlooked by up and coming musicians.
Of course, there's plenty of things that like young musicians are they're just, it's not in their heads yet, and it's not going to be for a long time. I think a lot of those things, and I have those, there's things I don't even know about right now. Nobody's ever at the top of the mountain, you know? So ironically, with those young musicians, I'm in the same boat as they are in a weird way. But before I say anything, I should say that some of the things that I feel like younger musicians don't keep in mind or don't know, some of those things are things they probably don't need right now or will just need later on when they're older and in their 30s or 40s or something. And right now it's just not part of it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, and some of these things aren't even musical, because I actually feel like younger musicians are so focused on notes and music and theory and everything. Like that's actually not the issue. They think about all that stuff too much, probably, you know? So I think a lot of young musicians like are really, really focused on being successful and have a very, very like clear cut, firm definition of what success means. So much so, and thinking about the future and just how they're going to pull it off, that they forget about the success they're already having. Be it maybe they got into music school, maybe they have a band and they played their first gig. Maybe they just played their first gig and somebody paid them $20. Maybe they just learned a G7 chord for the first time. All these little victories. When you're really young, I feel like you just aren't, you're actually kind of like the most in the moment you're ever going to be. You just haven't even had time to be self-aware yet or anything. It's ironic, as you get a little older, you're trying to get back to that place. I know this is very confusing, but so yeah, I think some younger musicians, like, it's important to, as best as they can, try to enjoy every moment and not worry about becoming successful. Just worry about enjoying being successful in whatever way that you are, you know? Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm. What about up and coming bands professionally?
Same thing. Even more so what I just said. You know, because those ones are really like, that's when you really start to, when I joined a band was when I really started to, you know, you get a little taste of success and you just want more. And the success that you do have kind of feels like it's not good enough. You just want whatever's just on the other side of the horizon.
Good old success.
By the time you're 35, you're looking back and you're like, man, oh, that was so great. And I was just so miserable wanting whatever I felt was next in the story, you know? So I feel like people kind of forget to just enjoy being where they are at any given moment. That's really hard to do, though. And I kind of feel like you need that really blind ambition when you're young, or you might look around in your 30s and be like, oh, shit, you know? So I think it is sort of important that when you're younger to be that ambitious, you know? Well, you have the energy to be, and you're young, so you're okay with being uncomfortable. You don't care but that you're sleeping in a van on tour and not getting hotels, and you only have enough money to eat half of a Subway sandwich for lunch, you know? Because you're just bulletproof. You're 23. You don't even know what it feels like to be comfortable yet. So I feel like, well, you're young. You do need to just push hard. But if you can have both of those mentalities, I think you'll have a better time.
If you could open up musicians' eyes to one of the different elements of music, which might you select?
I mean, like the space leaving thing is such a hard earned tool that just I've accepted that for the rest of my life it's going to take constant upkeep to be a good space lever. I mentioned it a little earlier with my bandmates, and what I admire about them is that I hear a lot of musicians who put a little too much emphasis on being good but not sounding good, you know? Um, and the answer to that is usually playing less. You know, if you really stop and forget about like you impressing people and think about the band sounding good, usually your answer to making, like, if you really are using your ears and listening to your band, especially an improvisational band, to take a second and be like, does this sound good? And what can I do to make it sound better? Usually the answer is playing less stuff as opposed to more stuff.
Has it been an easy road for you coming to this place where you're like relinquishing your self-importance, kind of like at least musically speaking?
No.
Talk to me about that. How did you become face to face with that lesson?
Listening to lots of recordings of our band. When you listen back, I mean, you don't know in the moment. I mean, there's just no way to be objective. You could think you're absolutely just playing the greatest music of your life, and then you listen a couple days later and you're like, never mind, we weren't. And even then, sometimes you listen to a recording and it's the worst recording you've ever heard, and another day you listen to the same recording and you're in a better mood and it sounds great to you. But just listening for years and years to our recordings and sort of having like a barometer of my quality of my standard of excellence, you know. I think a lot of that, and a lot of it just, it's so personal. It's playing the best for the band that you're in, you know. And I feel like a lot of that actually has more to do with you and your bandmates and just going through 15 years of like deep shit together. Um, and like being there for each other and caring for each other and like sitting in a van and going through all this crazy stuff together and seeing each other at their best and their worst. Your empathy and compassion for each other just like naturally it's going to bleed into the music too. Do you know what I mean? Like you're going to play that way too, where you're thinking about your bandmates more than you're thinking about yourself. It just happens over time, I think, if you just keep at it long enough. um so yeah, I think some of it actually comes with leaving a little more space and playing a little more maturely as you get older. Some of it just happens anyways because your hands get a little slower too. So you kind of have no choice but to go in the opposite direction. Like I think the days of becoming a faster guitar player for me are long gone. I've had tendonitis since I was like 23. So for me, it's sort of like I had to like, I've always kind of like thought to myself, like, I can always get better, but maybe not faster or more technical because that doesn't necessarily mean better. But just thinking about like what can I say with the things that I do have, you know? Like how can I maximize that? Instead of gaining new tools, what's the most creative things that I can say with the things that I do have, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah.
As a teacher, what does growth look like for you these days?
Um being being as patient as I can be. But also um having a threshold where I'm not going to bullshit anybody anymore if they're not getting their money's worth, you know? So like not like you don't need to be like a a horrible mean, it doesn't have to be like the movie Whiplash or anything. But if somebody paid you $80 or whatever and did a lesson, they came back 2 weeks later and they didn't know anything that you gave them. Sometimes I might let that slide once or twice, but there is a point when I'll be like, look, man, like I don't want to talk about this again. I already did this, and you're wasting your money, you know. So it's not like I'll tell them I can't teach them anymore. I just kind of like I had teachers who do that to me. Like they got serious when I was slacking off, and I was like, oh man, this isn't a game. Like this is serious, you know. And and ultimately, I was always grateful for that, you know. Um, so I try to have that when it's necessary. So essentially, I guess that I would chalk that up to not being a pushover, you know. Uh, but also being patient. There's an alchemy between those two things.
Mm.
Um, And yeah, what else? I guess just being good at reading a student and explaining things in a way that will make sense to them, you know? Um, but I'm still learning how to teach all the time. I've been teaching for 15, 16 years, and I'm still getting better at it. So I might discover something that results in becoming a better teacher and have a totally different answer for you if you ask me 6 months from now. Yeah.
Jumping back, talking about your playing,
Mhm.
what do you think it is about your guitar playing that impacts your greatest fans in the way that it does?
I don't know if it's really my job to know that. I just I play things that I would like to hear, you know, and then the right people who that'll impact will also enjoy it. If I get too caught up in that answer, then it might lead me to not play things that I want to hear and play things that I think someone else would want to hear, and that's not really what I want. Um, I want to just like play things that I imagine, and then the right people will like them. I'm not worried about how many of them there are. Just the people that it will mean something to will hopefully find it. And it's nice when people do sort of like you're like, oh, there's some kindred souls out there who also want to hear those things. Uh, yeah,
So Kindred Souls, there's this
yeah.
new Dopapod album. We're gonna have a link right here. Any final thing you want to leave anyone who's listened this far into this episode off with, from you to them?
No, not really, man. Just keep coming to shows, keep listening. We're more psyched than we've ever been. So if you want to see a Dopapod show and you want to see a good one, I think now is the time. Because we feel good about what we're doing right now. So yeah, yeah.
Last question.
Sure.
If you had to, you're walking on the street, someone comes up to you, you're Rob Compa. I'm learning guitar. Tell me some advice. And you just got like 2 seconds to drop them some advice. What might you say?
Gosh, it just depends so much on the person. Learn stuff by ear. Yeah. I think that's like ever since the dawn of the internet, that's been a very overlooked thing. Um, like people just look up tabs and stuff like that, and I think it's more fun, and you get more out of learning things by ear instead.
Rob Compa, everybody. Shout out to Dopapod. Rob, thank you, man. Great to talk
Thank
to you.
you.
Well, if you made it this far, thank you for tuning in. Big shout out to our sponsor, Thrax. Check them out if you're looking for some incredibly high quality CBD and THC gummies. Also, big shout out to J&J Distribution. Retailers, check out their brands Kush Burst, Death by Gummy Bears, and Compassionate Buds. Also, big shout out to SEM Tickets. If you're throwing events and you're looking for a reliable ticketing source that's well priced, look no further. Got links in the description. Much love, y'all.